So it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Young. Many of you probably know Dr. Young. She is currently an associate professor here at Virginia Tech in the ECE department. She received her doctorate in computer science in 2006 from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And she's concentrated her research since that time on design, modeling, and analysis of networking systems and security systems. She's been named the Faculty Fellow of Virginia Tech College of Engineering, and that was in 2016. And she was an NSF Faculty Early Career Award winner, which is a very prestigious award. And she's also been the principal investigator of 8 NSF-funded projects. Again, very impressive. Those are not easy to come by. NSF is a very competitive funding source. And so it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Young, who will be talking to us today about understanding the threat of GPS spoofing to attack everyday applications. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Can anyone hear me? Can everyone hear me? Okay, great. Oops. Let me project the slides.
It's a little bit slow, but let's see.
Okay. Okay. Okay, I get it too. Okay, great. Oops, too many. Okay, so the first thing I would like to do in today's talk about GPS spoofing attacks on application, everyday application, is to do a little bit of a tutorial about what is GPS, in case some of you don't really know what GPS is. GPS stands for Global Positioning Systems. It provides services in terms of positioning, navigation, and also timing. It has 3 segments: the space segment, the control segment, and the user segment. The space segment is formed by 31 satellites orbiting around the Earth, and the animation shows their constellations. And it ensures that any time, anywhere on the Earth, at any moment, there are at least 6, I think, or 5 satellites that are simultaneously available to the view of the GPS receiver. And the control segment are actually some ground stations distributed around the globe that provide monitoring and control basically of the satellites. And the user segment is essentially the GPS receivers that are embedded in everyone's car navigation system, smartphones, in some of the timing devices distributed in power grids and financial industry. GPS use code division multiplexings to multiplex different satellite signals onto 2 common wireless channels. So there are 2 channels that are used by GPS. And GPS is operated by US Air Force, and the GPS satellites, all the GPS satellites carry highly accurate and tightly synchronized atomic clocks. So you can consider that they are, the time on each of the satellites are synchronized, and the ground stations help them to maintain that synchronization. And each GPS receiver must know where the satellites are, and the location actually is carried in the GPS signals transmitted by the satellite. So that the receiver, when they decode the received signal, they will figure out the exact location of each satellite when they transmit a signal. And also the receiver needs to know the receiving time of each satellite signal, and this is done through the receiver's local measurement. The receiver locally have his own local clock, and he will record when to receive a particular satellite signal. And also he will need to know the transmission time of each satellite signal. And that information is again carried in GPS signal. Each satellite, when they transmit their signals, they will put timestamp information about when they transmit a particular signal. So that's a very high level idea. Of course, the details will be slightly different, but that's the concept. And when the GPS receivers know those 3 things, either by decoding the received GPS signals or by local measurement, then he can use the time of travel it takes for the satellite signals to go from the satellite to reach the receivers to calculate his distance to each of the satellites. And then he can use that distance information to localize himself. In addition, because remember the GPS satellite they have very accurate atomic clocks inside, and the timing information is actually carried inside the GPS signal they transmit out. So using those timing information, the GPS receivers can synchronize his own local clocks to those satellite clocks, so that in this way we can have very accurate, globally synchronized, accurate timing using GPS. So that's the two. That's how basically GPS works in reality. And if you want to look into the mathematics of it, then in essence, GPS usually use time differences of arrival for the estimation of his location. Mathematically means that if you have views to at least 4 satellites, then the distance between this particular GPS receivers to here n represents the index of the GPS satellite. So between the GPS receiver to the nth, so n can be 1, 2, 3, 4 satellite, the distance between the receiver to the satellite equals the speed of light, which is c, times the time it takes to travel from that satellite to the receiver. So that time of travel is essentially the transmission time of that particular signal to the receiving time that are recorded at the receiver, plus this delta t, which essentially is the receiver's local clock error, because the receiver's local clock can have drift, so it can have a significant error. So we will also need to correct that. Oops, what happened? Okay, so, and if we assume the satellite's location in the space is represented by x, n, y, n, and z, n, and then the receiver's location is x, n, y, and z, then you can see that this equation essentially we have 4 unknown parameters, which are delta t, x, y, and z. If you have 4 satellites, then essentially you will be able to have 4 expressions, formulas like this, then you can solve all the 4 unknown variables, which includes the delta t, which is a local time error comparing to the satellite's atomic clock, and then there's also x, y, z, which is the receiver's location. So you got the location and you got the time. So that's basically the principles of how GPS works. And there are 2 types of GPS services provided. One is the surveillance GPS service, which provide coarse localization result. The spreading code uses called coarse acquisition code, and it's an unencrypted version of the GPS services, and the format of the signals and the spreading code they use, etc., are all published in public database. Everybody can view it, and this GPS signal is transmitted at a lower rate and it's less accurate. Another type of GPS service is military GPS service. And the spreading code they use is encrypted, and then it cannot be decrypted if you don't know the secret key, which is changing over time. And so this is majorly used for military purposes. It has higher accuracy in terms of the localization, and the signal is also transmitted at higher rate. So we are going to focus on civilian GPS, which is what is used probably most widely in nowadays. And the word actually depends on GPS. The most commonly used GPS application probably is in our smartphones, and we all use Google Maps. And our cars depend on GPS to navigate them if you are driving in an unfamiliar location. And there are also some other applications that are also relying on GPS services. For example, like financial market. They use GPS to provide accurate timing so that a financial transaction can have an accurate time stamps. This is very important in the days of, right now, the financial banks and investment companies, they are using, they are doing very fast trade, and when a particular transaction is done, that precise timestamp on those things are critical for the financial market, and how they get actually that globally synchronized timestamp is actually they are using GPS. And another application that relies on GPS is power grid. The reason is because the power grid, there's the control unit of power grid. Power grid is a very large distributed system, and we have to have control unit to control the power grid. And there's monitoring units that need to be installed on the power grid, different locations of the power grid, to get, for example, precise snapshot of the power grid, right? At a snapshot of a particular time, and you can see the power grid status around the entire United States. And using that, you can do the proper power control, control operations on the power grid. But if the time stamps on the snapshot is wrong, right? So then that can significantly affect the proper operation of power grid, and can even cause damage to power generators or even a large blackout event. And also there are also other possible usage for like air traffic controller. You rely on GPS to tell where each airplane is. And like shipping and maritime applications, it probably requires the GPS to track where the cargo ship goes, and all these different type of applications. So I will skip describing every one of them. And so you can see that a lot of our modern applications rely on GPS to properly operate, and threats to GPS system essentially is threatening to the proper operation of the modern society. There's two types of threats to GPS systems. The first one is GPS jamming, means that someone can just send noises on the GPS channels to disable GPS services. And this actually is a threat to both military and civilian GPS service. If someone jammed the GPS channel, remember there's only 2 GPS channels out there, and GPS frequency band out there. So if you send out a overwhelmingly strong jamming signal on those bands, you can probably basically disable both the military GPS and both the civilian GPS. And another more stealthy attack is called GPS spoofing. In GPS spoofing attack, the attacker will send bogus GPS signals to manipulate the location time calculation at the GPS receiver without the receiver actually realize it. This will mostly threat civilian GPS services because there's no encryption yet. Military service is more or less immune to this type of attack. But there are also arguments that because a lot of the military equipment, they have a default building mode, means that if our military mode is being jammed, then they will fall back to the civilian to see if it will work on the civilian side. And in those cases, then you can still use GPS spoofing to attack them. And some military equipment is not even built to use the military GPS service because of cost and because of the overhead associated with updating the secret keys that is required to decrypt the military GPS signal. So for all those reasons, so there's for all those things, you can see that there's these 2 type of attacks pose a severe threat to GPS systems. And in my talk, I'm going to mostly focus on the GPS spoofing part. So I would like to elaborate a little bit more about how GPS spoofing works. A spoofer operator first need to figure out which GPS satellites will be in the vicinity of the target based on the satellite's orbit, so that the orbit of the satellite is known, so he can predict at a particular moment which satellite will be visible to a particular GPS receiver. Then the spoofer will validate each satellite signals using formulas available in the public database. And then the spoofer broadcasts the fake GPS signals. And one of the naive ways that he can first jam the GPS service, so sending the jamming signal on the GPS channel, which will lock the receiver's lock on the legitimate signal. Because of the jamming, then the receiver's radio will lose the lock on the GPS signal. And then the attacker can broadcast a strong bogus GPS signals, such that the receiver, when the jam signal disappears, the receiver then come back and tries to find where the GPS signal is. Then the receiver will then lock onto the bogus signal, and that because the bogus signal will have a stronger signal strength than the legitimate signal, and will the legitimate signal. A more covert approach. So this naive approach, why it won't work, why it is called naive, is because it's possible for the receivers to realize that, because the receivers lose GPS signals, right? You see, oh, I lose a period of time that the signals get lost. So then the receivers may realize he's under attack. A more covert approach don't even cause that essentially interruptions with the service. In the more covert approach, the spoofers first broadcast a fainter signal than the legitimate signal, and this fainter signal is exactly the same as the legitimate signals. The same clock, the same information, so everything is the same. And then the spoofers operator gradually increase the power of the false GPS signals until the receiver catches on these new signals. And once the receiver has latched onto the fake signals, no matter in the naive approach or the more convert approach, then the operator can adjust the spoofers and to basically let the receivers to compute new signal coordinates and leave the true signal behind because it's already logged onto the fake signal. So that's how GPS spoofing works. And there has already been some reported GPS attacks. For example, in 2008, London Stock Exchange actually find that they have lost 10 minutes of timing information every single day due to, they suspect it's because of the GPS jammer in a vehicle passing by. And that times, there's a lot of companies that they start to install GPS tracking devices frequently on their trucks to make sure the drivers is actually doing their work, not in the parking lot drinking coffee. So a lot of drivers don't like their companies to I'm watching you type of method. So those drivers will buy the GPS jammers and put them in their cars. And when those drivers drive by, one of the drivers drive by the New York Stock Exchange, that is causing London Stock Exchange to lose their timing information that is critical for their financial transaction. And in 2012, I think the research group in University of Texas Austin actually have demonstrated that the PMU, which is a device to take the snapshot of power grid status, that unit can be spoofed, means that they can get the runtime snapshot, and they actually have demonstrated that it's possible for that kind of attack to cause power generators to shut down, or cause power generators to be damaged, or even widespread power outage. And that's about the attack on the timing. On the timing of timing services of a GPS. And there's also report about GPS attack on localization services. For example, I think it's the same in University of Austin. University of Texas Austin group that did this attack on a drone and a boat in year 2012 and 2013. Both times they successfully diverted those drones and the boat to another, basically deviate them to a different route than the original plan. Okay, so next we are going to talk about will it be possible to launch GPS attack on car navigation systems. And this is the work that my group has done that is published in this year's Usenet Security Symposium. And one of the things I want to mention is that the differences between our group and group's work and those existing works, previous work, is that the GPS localization attack on existing work, they attack boat and drones, they are in open area and open water. So there's no reference for those vehicles to tell if they are being diverted from their original plan. But when you try to divert or attack vehicle navigation systems, then things are a little bit different. The reason is because vehicle navigation systems have some challenges. This is an animation showing the challenge. So this left one is showing what the drivers will see in the real world. And the right map is what the driver's navigation system is showing, just for example, like your Google map. Okay. And now assume that if you do a naive GPS spoofing attack and you just make the GPS receivers on the car to believe he is actually in this location, while in reality he's actually here. And so then the GPS the navigation systems on the car will recalculate the path. Because now you are here, so the navigation system will think this is the path that you should drive. And the user then just drive along that path. And then at this point, the navigation system will tell the drivers to turn left. And if in reality, what the driver says is that there's no left turn. Okay? So that essentially means that the spoofing, this naive spoofing, is creating a physically impossible route. And that can alert the user, say, hey, I'm under attack. So essentially, this example shows that if you want to use GPS spoofing to attack navigation systems, then random naive manipulation won't work because it won't cope with road constraints. For example, the road shape, the speed limit. If you ask users to drive 60 miles per second and he's obviously driving in a local path, then the user can probably realize something is not right. It can create physically impossible route. It asks users to turn left, but there's no left turn. There's no street that you can turn left. And then also, because in the car navigation systems, there's human driver in the loop. And all these abnormalities can alert the human drivers, and then let the human driver detect that he's under spoofing attack. So the question then becomes, if we have this human in the loop situation, and it's possible to still launch successful GPS attack without even being detected. And we call this is a stealthy attack on car navigation systems. And the answer to that is yes, and I will use another example to show how this can be done. So still taking this real-world comparison with a navigation map comparison, and assuming that this time the GPS spoofer is spoofing the cars to this location, and the car navigation system then calculate a new path for the user. And the user, under the navigation system's instructions, he drives his cars, and then the navigation system tells him to turn right, and the user follow the instructions, and then he reach a location here, which is different from his original destination. Why this time it works is because this carefully constructed attack ensures that I want to define ensures that the fake. Let me take back. Ensures that the actual path the user drives through matches with this navigation path that is computed in the GPS receiver. And I want to define several terminologies to further discuss this. So we define the actual location and the route that the user originally planned to drive from his actual location to his original destination as the original route. So this is the original route, actual location, and the original destination. And then there's this spoofed position, we call it the ghost location. And the route that is showing on the navigation screen of the user side, we call it ghost route, because the user never really drives through that route. He just thinks he's driving along that route. And the route that the user actually drives through following the instruction on the navigation system is called the victim route. And the key is that the victim route and the ghost route should have very similar shape in terms of speed limit, in terms of where you turn right, where you turn left. Okay, if you can find the ghost route that essentially matches the victim route, this is where the attacker want to let the GPS, the human drivers to drive along, right? So if you can find a ghost route that matches the attacker's goal, then the attacker can launch attack. Okay, so one of the assumptions of our attack here is that for the attackers to know the ghost route and the victim route, he needs to find the ghost route match the victim route. The attacker has to have some knowledge, prior knowledge, and that prior knowledge is that the attacker has to know the rough destination area of the victim. So essentially where the driver wants to drive to. He has to have a rough idea of that. And is not exactly that hard to get. A lot of applications, for example, like Uber, will broadcast the destination. Anyone with a Uber driver's and application can receive where the a customer wants to go. And another possible source of finding out where the victim is going is through the calendar. Some people publish their calendars, and that will tell you, sometimes we'll have the information about where the user tries to have a meeting. And also Facebook. Some people just post where I'm going on their Facebook, social media. And also, sometimes there are actually landmarks. For example, like there are bridges, tunnels, etc. So you know that people, when they go to work, they usually go through that same bridge, same tunnel. And so those kind of things can give you a rough idea about the destination or where the user are going. And that is enough for attackers to figure out how to find the proper ghost route to match the victim route. And so theoretically, this means that when we take a map, then attacker will then first map this real map into a directed graph, where every node on this directed graph represents an intersection. And then he will do an exhaustive breadth-first search to find two paths. One is a victim path and one is a ghost path that have exactly, not exactly, but very similar shape in terms of, for example, left turn matches left turn. Speed limit, the differences between the speed limit is under a certain value threshold. And if the paths can match, and the distance of them will also match, and then we can see that attack can be launched. And sometimes you may find that you cannot find a ghost route that will satisfy the particular target victim route. But that's okay, because then you can launch multiple rounds of those attacks. Then essentially means that you can basically append those multiple search results together to create the desired victim route that you want. So the search, this algorithm will run potentially multiple iteratives and ends whenever the attack's goal is met. Goals attackers, the first one is deviating the victim with no specific target destination. So for this type of attack, for example, they can be launched on like ambulance, police cars. You just want to delay how long it takes for them to arrive at a certain location. So you don't really care where you divert them. And that is one type of attacker's goal. And another type of attacker's goal is that they really want to get the victims to a particularly predefined location so that they may ambush the victim there to steal their cars or money. And the final possible attacker's goal is that they want to divert the victim to a dangerous situation. For example, they want to divert the users to drive on the runway direction on the highway, and that can potentially lead to fatal car crashes. And so those are all the three types of attacker goals that can be achieved using this stealthy attack. What we have done is we did a simulation, a trace-driven simulation, to see how likely to launch such kind of attack, like how likely it's to find a feasible ghost route to match a victim route, where the victim route can be designed to satisfy one of these goals. So we take 600 real-world trips randomly selected from New York City and Boston's taxi data sets. And we run the basic attack, which is only run our algorithm for one round, and the iterative attack, which is we can run 2 iterations to concatenate our attack path. So for the goal, if the attacker just wants to delay deviating the victims, then on average for New York and Boston, we have for each of the taxi trip, we can have on average 335 and 350, 107 qualified victim routes per taxi trip. And you can see that actually, for the endangering attacks, you can see that 599 out of 600 actual real-world trips can contain runway route segment. Means that out of all the 600 real-world trips, we can launch attack and divert the drivers to go on a runway situation. And so, if the attacker have a specific location, target location where they want to divert the victims to ambush him, and we also evaluate the possibility of that. And here is the metric we use. We call it hit rate. So assuming this is how we define hit rate. Assuming the driver's original location is here and he plans to reach his original destination here. And we divide this geographic area map into grid, and then we define a sweeping radius centered at the driver's location, and then we did basically along this driver's original route, we let the sweeping radius to mark some of those grid areas, and we call it candidate grid. Okay, and then we randomly select. Then we check if a target location. So it means that if an attacker wants to divert the drivers to these locations, if it's possible for the attackers to divert the victims to any of those grid locations that is shadowed here. And we find that 70% of those locations can be the victim's, essentially victim locations, and where he's diverted to that particular location. So among all those grades. So we call this a hit rate. So the hit rate is about 70% with a radius of 500 meters in the Manhattan area. So this means that even the attacker put a randomly predefined locations, there is still a very high probabilities that he will be able to divert the victim to. Okay, so this is all about our theoretical computation and evaluation in simulation. Then the next question is it possible to really implement the attack in real world, like build it? And to answer that question, we build our low-cost portable GPS spoofer using a very small software-defined radio called HackRF, and an antenna, a mobile charger, and a Raspberry Pi. And there's a pen here. You can see that this is in comparison to the size of our GPS spoofer. So this size is very small. You can fit it very easily into a lunchbox, actually much smaller than this one. The software and hardware for the systems are open source, means that anyone can download the GPS spoofer, which is open software, and this hardware is also very cheap. The total cost of this entire thing is $223 US. So we use these spoofers to carry out our attacks in real world. And one of the things is that no human beings are harmed in our experiment. We have difficulties of obtaining experimental license in the US, so that's why we done all our experiment in China, and with temporary legal permissions from the local authorities and local IRB approval. And we reduce our transmission powers very, very small to make sure that it won't affect any GPS receivers that are 5 meters away from the transmitter. And we also do controlled measurement at outdoor parking lot where at midnight time when nobody is around. And so with all these precautions, we carried out our attack. And also, we actually have done also one experiment actually driving on the road, but that is at 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. in the morning. So when there's really nobody is driving around us. So this is our configuration. We tune the software-defined radio's transmission power to be -40 dBm, that's a minimum transmission power that the platform can enable us, and add attenuators, another minus 30 dBm onto it. And also, we put the spoofers inside the car, so the body shield of the car provide another 15 dBm reduction. And then, assuming that the other GPS receivers are 2 meters away, so the 2 meter propagation loss is another 42.41 dBm. So that can give us like roughly 127.41 dBm kind of a strength of any other GPS receivers that are 2 meters away from our spoofing device. And at midnight, that means you probably won't affect anyone nearby. So this is our control measurement setup. So we put our spoofer in 2 settings. The first setting is we put our spoofers inside the trunk of the victim car, and then we put a smartphone with GPS navigation app at the front windshield position. And another scenario is that we put the spoofers inside a second car that is tailgating the victim car. And the distance between them is 40 to 50 meters. So on this, what we find is that in this same car situation, you can consider that attacker, for example, he take a ride with the victim driver, and then he left a small package, hidden it inside the trunk or maybe under the seat. And so in this kind of attack scenarios, it takes around 40 seconds for the spoofers to take over the GPS receivers on the smartphone. And in the second situation, when the distance between these 2 cars is about 40 to 50 meters, then it also takes around the same amount of time, still 40 seconds to take over. So the distance between the spoofer and the phone doesn't seem to make a significant difference in terms of the takeover time. So this is our attack scenarios. One of our authors is driving the cars. It's a full escape, and he will follow the navigation instructions from his Google phone, from his smartphone. And the other author is operating our GPS spoofers from the back seat. And this is, you can see the paths that we drive through in these 2 scenarios. And so in each of these attack cases, we successfully diverted the victim cars to 2.1 and 2.5 kilometers away, respectively. Okay, so that shows that not only theoretically our attack on car navigation system is possible, and in reality we actually can implement it fairly easily with a relatively low cost. And so then the next question is, will the human driver in loop detect that he's under attack? So that's why we, in our research, we have done some user study and with driving simulator. So we cannot really put the users in the cars and let them drive in a real road situation, because that is going to endanger their life. So what we did is that we built a driving simulator. So we let the users to drive in a car simulator, and we will tell them that they are testing that car simulator's functionality, so usability testing. And we give them instructions that they will play the truck drivers in that game, that's essentially driving simulators, to deliver a package from location A to location B, and we will see if they can be diverted without noticing that they are under GPS attack. And this is our experimental setup. You can see this is actually a computer. They are just like playing a computer game trying to drive their cars. And this is the simulator is very realistic. So this is the simulator created virtual world, and this is actually Google Street Views on that same location. So you can see it's fairly realistic. And then we will, while the user is playing the drivers in the simulators, then we will use our software to basically create the spoofing attacks at real time. And whenever the user recognizes, hey, something's wrong, I'm under attack, at least they comment that, oh, I think the GPS is not working correctly. So whenever they comment that, we end that experiment and record that the user recognized the attack. And after that, after this experiment, we'll give the user a complimentary survey and also interview to know why they can or cannot detect the attack. And then we'll tell, and then we will tell them our real purpose is to test their awareness with GPS spoofing and obtain their consent to publish the result. And the key result is this. The attack success rate is extremely high, 95%, 38 users out of 40 users. The users, half of the users is in China, half of the users is actually our Virginia Tech students. So out of all these two groups of people, 38 out of 40 are fools. They didn't even realize they are under attack. Only 2 users detected, and by checking their surrounding environment and the navigation map to find inconsistency. One of the users, for example, find I'm under attack because on the navigation map it's showing that he's driving on a local ways, but then when he look around, he find I'm driving on a highway. This is not right. So, and another observations from this experiment and the survey is that we find the users are more likely to use GPS in unfamiliar area. And so then it's just like it seems to be common sense, right? When we are driving in Blacksburg campus, we probably don't need GPS. Whenever you want to use GPS is when you are not familiar with that local environment. And in that kind of situation, it's most vulnerable for the users because they don't have enough pre-knowledge and time to check the inconsistency. They just blindly trust the GPS. And also, our spoofer that uses the jam and then take over method. So there will be a temporary loss of a GPS signals on the receiver end. And we ask the user why they don't notice that. And then their answer is that, well, in real world, when they're driving, sometimes they also lose GPS signals because there are buildings blocking the thing. So maybe the GPS receiver just malfunction. Who knows what the reason is? Because they have experienced temporary loss of GPS signals in their everyday life. So they just assume that same thing happened again, and it doesn't alert them at all. So that shows that the GPS threat is a real danger for car navigation systems. And this is all assuming human users are still sitting behind the driver's seat. And what happens if we get to the age of autonomous driving cars when there's not even a human brain behind the wheel? And things can go even more dangerous in that kind of situation. And so now we have elaborated not enough about all the potential threats to GPS and GPS-based applications. Then you may have a question is, are there any countermeasures? Are we hopeless under the attacker's potential threat? The answer is, actually there are some very interesting proposals about the countermeasures to GPS spoofing and also jamming attack. So you can divide the countermeasures into 2 types of categories. The first category is GPS spoofing detection. How can we connect the receivers to realize he's under attack so that his calculation of time and calculation of location is not trustworthy? One of the means is that if you can let your GPS receivers to be connected online with other GPS receiver, and then assuming that attacker won't be able to simultaneously attack all the GPS receiver, and one of those GPS receivers is in a secure location that everybody trusts that he will not be attacked, then you can compare your own recorded GPS signal with that trusted receiver's receptions, and then if there's a discrepancy, you know, I'm under attack. Another type of detection method is using signal distortion detection. And this one is saying that let's look at the received signals. This is assuming the GPS receiver is on his own, but he can examine his received signals to detect if there's any abnormalities. of normalcies in his received signal. For example, remember in the spoofing attack, we have to let the faked signals to be stronger than the real legitimate signals so that the receiver will latch onto the fake signal. And so that can create potentially a blip in amplitude profile, means that there's a sudden jump of the amplitude if the attacker is not very careful in gradually increasing the attack signal. So that sudden increase in signal amplitude can be basically a red flag of attack. Another, of course, is the timing information. Remember, the attacker, although he can send a stronger GPS signal, the faked signal than the real signal, but the real signal is still there. He cannot eliminate it. So if the receiver is able to monitor both the signals, the fake signal and the real signal, and then he will notice that these two signals have timing differences. And he will notice that, I'm under attack. So it means that requires the receivers to be able to monitor two basically signals that are on the same channel, using the same spreading code. And so that's are the two examples of those signal distortion detection mechanism. And some of the GPS chips, those are usually the high-end GPS chips, probably already have those signal distortion detection mechanism built in. So, for example, that U-Blocks. This is a company that manufactures GPS chip, and their GPS chip is used in Tesla. And that has this signal distortion detection mechanism built in. And we actually tried to attack Tesla, and we failed because of that, because our spoofer is the more naive version of it. It didn't really mask all his signals that well, so we create not enough distortions for the U-Blocks chips to detect that the signal is not trustworthy. And the third type of a countermeasure for GPS detection is signal direction of arrival sensing. So if you have multiple antennas, and then you can use those antennas to be able to detect the arrival direction of the signals. And remember, the attacker, for example, he is using a single box and then sending all the satellite signals. So those satellite signals' arriving direction is not natural, where in the real situation, those satellite is distributed all across the sky. So if you can detect where the signal arrived, the direction of the signal arrival, then you will be able to tell, the signal is not from the right direction. And so that's for the GPS spoofing. And also for those things will not work for GPS jamming. Okay, now, assuming GPS is jammed, or maybe you already detect that I'm under GPS spoofing, so my GPS data is all totally junk, I cannot use it, then there will be another alternative localization means that you can use to help yourself. And the answer is somewhat, yes, but not really. So there has been some proposals to develop a system called eLoRaN, and that is a ground-based localization system. Is that you put a lot of radio towers, and they are going to send some radio signals in a much lower frequency than a GPS signal, and those, just the same as the GPS signal, those radio signals from the ground towers will provide timing and location information to all the receivers. And the downside of this is you have to have a lot of those towers established all across the globe, or at least in the United States, and there's a huge cost associated with that. So the question mark, that's why there's a question mark, because the funding for doing that is not yet there. And another is through sensor fusion. So there has been people working on, say, if we can let the cars, for example, if it's a car, to figure out where he is driving, how long he is driving, what direction he is driving, by using his internal sensors. For example, by using his accelerometers, gyroscopes, by using his cameras. If it's a drone, he can take images of the ground he's viewing. If it's a car, he can take images of the street. And if we can use those information to figure out where the car is going, then we don't need to rely on GPS to figure out the location. Whether all those approaches, any of those things will become the winner, or will be able to completely defeat GPS spoofing, relies on three key factors. Number one, cost. How much it will cost to basically deploy that solution. And number two, do they require hardware modification? There's a lot of legacy GPS receivers already out there. Will this approach be able to use those legacy GPS receivers that have no built-in countermeasures. And also, does it require software update? If just require a simple software update, that probably is the ideal case because the cost of that is the lowest. But still, that requires a very wide awareness of the threat of a GPS attack. Okay, so that's about my talk about GPS spoofing attack today. And any questions?